Welcome to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. I'm Jason Della Rosa, the sports editor here at the Herald Democrat, and we have hit the final week of the high school football season, Week 17, state championship week, and we have two Texoma teams that will be playing for titles this week. Both Pottsboro and Gunter continue to stay alive. Both had fourth quarter comebacks. Both had defensive stops in the final moments to advance. Two great games in the state semifinals, and hopefully two great games coming up here for championships. Going to be an awesome Thursday afternoon into the evening at AT&T Stadium. Potentially, a doubleheader with two Texoma teams winning titles. Either way, it's going to be an awesome finish to the 2019 football season. So we're going to touch on those great wins last week in the semifinals, as well as preview what the Cardinals and the Tigers are in for coming up on Thursday. So we will start with Pottsboro and the 3A Division I state championship game. They will be taking on the defending champs Grandview at 3 p.m. on Thursday. Pottsboro is 15-0, so they have a chance to have an undefeated season. They're one of just 8 teams left in the entire state, regardless of classification, 1A to 6A, that has a chance to finish undefeated, while Grandview comes in at 14-1. Last week, Pottsboro won 36-35 against Brock, while Grandview won 41-21 against Columbus. So we'll start with the game last week against Brock. This was a game that for most of the night did not look like it was going to go Pottsboro's way. They did have a 14-7 lead after the first quarter, where basically every time one of the teams had the ball, they scored. So Pottsboro got the ball to open the game, and they just kind of bounced back and forth until in the second quarter, Brock was able to continue their offensive success. Pottsboro had to punt on one of their possessions, and also they had an interception. They had to settle for a field goal. So instead of matching touchdowns for touchdowns, things kind of bogged down a little bit there. So Pottsboro was down 21-17 going to the second half. And Brock comes out, scores on the opening drive of the third quarter. So now you're down 28-17. And then it's just trying to play catch up that whole second half. Unfortunately for Pottsboro, they were unable to get a stop through the third quarter. So every time that Brock had the ball in the first three quarters, they scored, and that's what allowed them to get to their 35 points. And Pottsboro did get a long touchdown pass in the third quarter, but they're still trailing. So it's 35-24 after three quarters, and for the first time all night, after Pottsboro scores within 10 seconds of the fourth quarter to make it a one-possession game, Pottsboro finally gets the stop that they need. They desperately needed that stop. If they don't get that stop, I don't think they end up winning this game. And so they've got a chance to take the lead for the first time since they were up in the first quarter. Finally found a way to get Brock off the field, and they end up turning that into a touchdown drive. Braden Plyler scores with about 5:27 left, and Pottsboro goes for 2 because they want to at least be up by 3 and force Brock to, if they kick a field goal sends it to overtime, doesn't win it for Brock. But the conversion fails. So Pottsboro's only up 1. There's 5:27 left, and that's where we stand. And unfortunately for the Cardinals, they're unable to hold things off for getting the ball back, being able to run out the clock. So Brock is going to have a chance to win this game, and it's gonna come down to the final seconds. There's under a minute to go. Brock gets to Pottsboro 26-yard line. So with 45, there's 55 seconds left at that point. So you're in position. You could kick a field goal. That's a long field goal. That's about a 42-yard field goal, and it's 3rd and 12. So we have a couple timeouts called, some strategy, trying to figure things out. Brock decides to go with a little trick play, little halfback pass back to the quarterback. So they split out. The running back, Cash Jones, who had a big night. We'll get to the totals here in a minute. So he's out left, split wide, and he's got 3 blockers in front of him. And then quarterback Jackson Gleaton throws to him and then tries to sneak out around the right side after throwing it to the left. And the Cardinals played it really well. They weren't fooled. Cooper Townsley is trailing Gleaton, and Tyler Ferris from a defensive back spot is ranging over. They are there, and then all you see is Gleaton go down on his back, and as he's falling, you have the two Cardinals are blocking the view, so you can't really see what's happening. Some people thought Gleaton caught it, and what ends up happening is Ferris ends up rolling off of Gleaton, and he has the ball for an interception, and Pottsboro nails out the win. They survive. They go to the championship game for the first time in school history. It was a great game. Brock basically did almost all of its offense on the ground. Cash Jones had 37 carries for 269 yards, scored all 5 of the touchdowns. He was basically unstoppable in terms of being the main focal point of the offense. And for Pottsboro, Braden Plower had 30 carries for 101 yards and scored twice. He was also 9 of 13 passing for 216 yards and a touchdown pass. Jason Hooker had the early touchdown run in the fourth quarter. That was supposed to be a trick play. He got it on the reverse and was supposed to throw back to Plyler, but he was covered, so he took off and was able to get into the end zone. And the other touchdown pass went to Ezra Fritz. It was a 69-yard pass. That went for, he finished with 2 catches for 78 yards. Zach Talley had 4 catches for 75 yards. A lot of that was early on to get the offense going. And Cy Shope finished with 11 carries for 79 yards and a touchdown. So it was a really great game. So we have Pottsboro coming out of that side of the bracket, and Grandview's coming out of the other side of the bracket. Like we mentioned, they are the defending state champions. Last year they made the championship game for the first time, so this is the second time for them. And like we just mentioned, Pottsboro, the best season before this year in school history had been the 2008 semifinals. Before then, they lost to Cisco at that time. Interestingly enough, the only other time that these two teams have played was during that 2008 playoff run, and that was in the region final. That's when Grandview was in Region 2 and not in Region 3, and Pottsboro won 31-9 in the region final to advance to make the semifinals for the first time ever. So would be kind of fitting if Grandview is the team that Pottsboro has to beat for its first state championship, since it was the first state semifinal appearance by beating Grandview 11 years ago. Pottsboro continues offensively to extend their own school record. We've touched on it week after week because they keep adding to it. This is a chance. If they score 16 points, they'll have 700 points on the season. The old mark in 2015 was 525. So if they have a really big night, they could finish 200 points. If they get into the 30s like they have the last couple weeks, they could be 200 points ahead of the old record. That says how potent they've been. And they've played a lot of close games. We've talked about it every week. 3 weeks ago, they win by 7 against Malakoff on a touchdown with 36 seconds left. 2 weeks ago, they beat Gladewater by a point. in double overtime when they stopped a 2-point conversion, and then this last week with the 1-point win, 36-35 against Brock. So they've been in close games. Braden Plyler has had the deciding touchdown in every single one of them. So if that trend continues, that would be something to look at. And they've while it is the biggest game of the season, it's going to be on the biggest stage, and you're going to be having to deal with that for the first time with Pottsboro, while Grandview has the experience. I think these last 3 games have really one, built up the confidence that Pottsboro knows, one, they can play with anybody and they can pretty much beat anybody, but they've also been in situations where they've had to come through each week to advance, and I think that helps calm some of those nerves about what it means to be in this game and playing the defending champs to try to win yourselves a state championship and finish with an undefeated season. To also add, the 15 wins continues to extend the school record, surpassing the 13 that the 2008 team was able to accomplish. And like I said, regardless of what happens on Thursday, obviously, they want to win a championship and they want to complete this undefeated run. No matter what happens, it's the best season Pottsboro's ever had. By far, they're either going to be 16-0 or 15-1. They made it to a championship game. They're going to be able to say they're either the state champs or the state runner-up, and no team in school history has had the success that this group has had. So either way, it's a fantastic season. To kind of touch on Grandview, like we said, they're 14-1. Their only loss was against Whitney, 26-21 in District 9-3A play. So they've pretty much beaten everybody else. And that game against Whitney, they had the lead. They were actually up 21-7 in the fourth quarter, and Whitney was able to rally, and they got the winning touchdown with 48 seconds left. They do have a common opponent with Pottsboro, and that common opponent is Malakoff. Malakoff was the state runner-up last year, if you remember when we did that preview. And they ended up playing Grandview again this year in non-district, and they were both close games. Grandview won 14-13. That was a game where Grandview ended up missing. Malakoff ended up missing a extra point, and that was the difference. Otherwise, that game was going to go to overtime after Malakoff scored in the mid to late fourth quarter, had a chance to tie it, and they missed the extra point, and then they lost. Whereas, like we mentioned, the Pottsboro game, they beat Malakoff 38-31. So Grandview's game with them was a little more defensive, while Pottsboro's was more of a shootout. But they were both close games. So if you want to take that into account for anything, you can. Outside of that, there were very few games that were close. Grandview has a very explosive offense. Just in the playoffs so far, to kind of run down their road, they won 42-7 over Rockdale, 43-29 over East Chambers, and that's also the most points they've allowed in a game this year. Is those 29 points? And honestly, the game against Whitney with those 26 points, those are the only 2 games this season that they've allowed more than 3 touchdowns. Everything else is pretty much 2 touchdowns or less. But to get back to that playoff run, then they beat Cameron Yo 45-14. They beat Troy 34-13, and then last week they beat Columbus 41-21. So they haven't had nearly as exciting a run as Pottsboro has had here in the playoffs. The game last week against Columbus, it was 41-21, but it was 41-7 in the third quarter. So that's a game that it looks a little bit better. Not that winning by 3 touchdowns is close by any stretch, but it was a situation where it was 41-7, and they got a couple late touchdowns to kind of make that look better than what it might have been. They do have the same quarterback from last year, Dane Jench. He's a junior last year, so he's a sophomore last year. Was able to lead his team to a state championship. So he's back. He was the all-state team for the Associated Press. Came out yesterday. Yesterday being Monday when this is being taped. And Grandview did have, obviously, as you would expect, some players chosen. Leading the way in that regard was Jench. He was not only the quarterback, the first team All-State quarterback. He was also named the Offensive Player of the Year for all of 3A. Now, conversely, Cy Shope got first team All-State accolades for Pottsboro, and that was one of those. That's one of those deals where that is a team that includes just regular season stats. There is an All-State team by the Texas Sports Writers Association that will come out about a month and a half because of that it will include the playoffs. So it's just a question of like I said, when you look at the ones here, the stats that are included are only for the playoffs. So if you have a really good playoff push, those are not included when we have to vote. For those. So it was one of those situations where Pottsboro did have a couple other players, Titus Lyons at receiver and Silas Barr on the defensive line. They were honorable mention All-State. But for the regular season, Jench was 141 of 213 passing for a little over 2,400 yards. He had 30 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. He also had 567 yards rushing and 6 TDs. That was just in the regular season. They also have. He was also first team All-State on defense with 111 tackles, 3 interceptions, 4 pass breakups, and a forced fumble. So he's a guy he's a two-way guy even as a quarterback. They also had one of their receivers, Austin Boyd, was an honorable mention All-State guy. And then on defense, they had a couple guys. Demetrius Crownover, who's a monster of a defensive lineman. He's about 6'7", 6'8". He's getting some Division I looks. At linebacker, two of their linebackers, Antonio Arellano and Michael Lenhart, got honorable mention All-State. So that's kind of what you expect from a defending state champ. They've got some really good players. In the game against Columbus, a lot of the work was done on the ground. Tremaine Galate, he ran 25 times for 128 yards and 3 touchdowns. And Jench threw for 179 yards and a touchdown. He also had 10 carries for 69 yards and a score. It should be an interesting matchup. I think if you're looking at it from the outside, a lot of people that predict these sort of things, I think they're leaning Grandview or going with Grandview because you have the experience factor and you have the defending state champs. And until somebody beats them, they hold the crown. And Pottsboro. Pottsboro's going to get the shot to knock them off. So we'll see what happens there. And so, like I said, that game's at 3 o'clock on Thursday afternoon. And following at 7 o'clock, also at AT&T Stadium as part of the doubleheader, we have Gunter against Paul Pewitt. And here you have a matchup of 14-1 against 14-1. And Gunter is the team that has all of the experience in this position. They won last week 27-20 against Canadian, while Paul Pewitt won 24-18 against East Bernard. And here is the situation there. You have Paul Pewitt. They are both teams are trying for their second state title in program history. The last time Paul Pewitt won was 1998, and Paul Pewitt has not been in the championship game since 2005. Now you have Gunter. This is the third time in 4 years that the Tigers have made the championship game. They won it in 2016, were the runner-up to Newton in 2017. So you have a senior class, one that is sitting with a 59-3 record in their high school careers, and they have. In the case of some of them, like a Peyton Lowe, he's played in all. He'll play in all three of the games. But if you were a senior, once you got into high school, this is pretty much all you know is going to the state championship game. Outside of last year, reaching the semifinals and losing to Canadian. So we can start there because Gunter was able to get a measure of revenge for that loss with a thrilling comeback, much like Pottsboro. Gunter was down going into the fourth quarter. They found a way to pull this out and win by making a defensive stop at the end. So we'll run that down. The only difference in this one is that Gunter never led until the fourth quarter. Canadian jumped out to a 10-0 lead midway through the first quarter. Gunter was able to kind of get their bearings a little bit. They were down 17-10 at halftime, so they kind of were able to settle in. Both teams kicked field goals in the third quarter. So we're going to the third quarter. Going to the fourth quarter. It's 20-13. Plenty of time. You get a whole quarter to play. The only question was gonna be able to find a way to pull this out. And so early in the fourth quarter, Hudson Graham connects with Peyton Lowe on a pass with a long down and distance pass. Lowe is running towards the sideline, the right sideline, coming across the field. He was able to break loose from a defender, and he was able to go 71 yards for the touchdown with about 8 minutes to go. So you think, okay, tie game, but they missed the PAT. So they're still down. It's 20-19. Still plenty of time. You get 8 minutes left. But they had to get a stop. And they were able to. They came up with a fumble recovery. Mitchell Brewer was able to jump on the ball in Canadian territory. But then the drive bogs down. 4th and 9. You're at the 36-yard line of Canadian, but it's 4th and 9. So do you go for it? Do you pin him? Try to make him go the length of the field? It's a 1-point game. There's about 6 minutes left in this game. So the question is, you might not get the ball back. You may get the ball back and you're down 8, potentially 9, depending on what Canadian does. So the Tigers decide to go for it. Graham's able to get the ball to Lowe again. Really good ball over the defender. He had to reach up and he still couldn't get it. And Lowe catches a 36-yard touchdown, and they go for 2 to make it a 7-point game. So that way, if Canadian scores, they don't win by 1. And Cole Lemons catches the conversion pass from Graham. So Gunter's up 27-20, and there's a little under 6 minutes to go. So Gunter's got to get they don't have to get a stop, but if they can hold on to win this game, they're now in position. After they hadn't led for 3.5 quarters, now they've got a lead. They're able to stop Canadian. Canadian gets into Gunter territory. They have a penalty. They've got to go for it because the time is starting to run out. There's about 2 minutes left, but it's like 4th and 25. They throw deep to the goal line, incomplete. Gunter takes over on downs. Problem is Canadians got 2 timeouts. So they use their timeouts, and they force Gunter to have to punt the ball back. So Canadian gets the ball back. 30 seconds left at their own 37. They've got a shot. They convert 2 straight 13-yard passes that are on the same play to the sideline. So they get to midfield, and then they get to the Gunter 37. 20 seconds left. Then the scramble on the next snap. The pass goes to the running back out of the backfield. He kind of runs around a little bit, fighting for yardage. Clock is ticking down, and with 3 seconds left, they're setting the chains. Everybody's scrambling to the line. They get the clock stopped. 1 second left at the 18-yard line, the Gunter 18-yard line. There's 18 seconds left, and so one final play, one final shot, and here we are. Here it's going to happen. Either Gunter's going to win or Canadian's going to force overtime. Throw goes to the end zone. It's out the side of the end zone. Not close. Referee is waving incomplete, no good. Time runs out, but there's a flag. Back judge calls pass interference. Didn't look like pass interference. Kind of, and it wasn't an uncatchable pass. But anyway, the flag has been thrown. There's going to be an untimed play because the clock ran out and the game cannot end on a defensive penalty. So the ball goes from the 18 to the 3-yard line. So 3 yards away is Canadian. Gunter's got to find a way to hold them out from 3 yards out now instead of 18. And the worst thing that could happen is Canadian scores and goes for 2. I think they probably would have kicked, but you never know. So we sort all that out. They go for it. They decide to run a receiver screen on the left side, and the receiver comes around to block from the slot, blocking the corner. He catches it. He's going towards the end zone. It's going to be close. It's going to be real close. But coming from his linebacker spot, it's Bryson Rigsby. And as Twister Kelton, who's the receiver who caught the pass, had turned and was starting to go towards the end zone, Rigsby meets him right at the goal line. I mean, right at the goal line. And he's not able to get away. He's pushed back. He falls down. And the ball does not cross the end zone. Immediate call by the line judge. All the replays, all the video that people have seen, I mean, you can see how close it is. And if Kelton reaches for the end zone, I think he's going to get it. A little bit of the crown of his helmet is in the end zone, but the ball is down low. When he caught it, he pulled it in to his body, and then he was unable to either reach across or kind of dive into the end zone because of the way Rigsby hit him. He had to duck around that block that Kelton did, and so he didn't have a lot of room to try to make that happen. And so Gunter was able to hold on, win, crazy celebration, and they're headed back to the championship game. So in the game for Canadian, or against Canadian, Peyton Lowe had 4 catches for 126 yards and the 2 touchdowns from Graham. Graham also ran for a score, and Lowe finished with 7 carries for 63 yards. Bryson Rigsby on offense had 14 carries for 45 yards. And Logan Hubbard kicked a pair of field goals. He had a 29-yarder in the first half and a 38-yarder in the second half. It was just a great team effort, a great game, great win, and it was to have both of these games with the local teams come down to the last second, and have both of them win to advance to the state semifinals on back-to-back nights was kind of crazy. So they're going to play Paul Pewitt. Paul Pewitt, ironically enough, they needed to make a goal line stand. Not as dramatic, not as close, but they were up 24-18, and East Bernard was driving in the final moments. They had to hold on to win, and so I'm sure they're just as excited about the way they won and able to advance. These teams do have a common opponent, and that leads us to the loss that Paul Pewitt has, but it's not as damaging as you would think, because Paul Pewitt comes in at 14-1, and their loss is to Dangerfield. That's the team that Gunter opened the season with. They beat them 22-21. They rallied from a first half deficit to pull that off. Pewitt and Dangerfield are from the same district, District 11 3A. When they played in district, Pewitt lost 42-38. Then they had a rematch in the region final, and they won 45-42. So both of their games against Dangerfield were close. Gunter's game against Dangerfield was close. Pewitt won one, lost one, and so I don't know how much you can put on that. For those who remember from a couple weeks ago when we did the podcast, this is the second Texoma team that Pewitt has played in the playoffs. Bells was having their best season in school history when they made the region semifinals. They went up against Pewitt. Pewitt won 53-20. You may remember from that when we had that conversation previewing that game. Paul Pewitt runs the slot T. When they played against Bells, they did not throw the ball once. They have only thrown the ball 41 times all season. So that works out to like 2 passes a game, maybe 3. So they don't want to pass. If they don't have to, they won't. When they do pass, though, it is effective. Crossholder is the quarterback. He's only got 21 of 41 completions, so that's like 50%, but he's got 522 yards. He averages 25 yards of completion, and 10 of his 21 throws have gone for touchdowns, and he only has 1 interception. So when they do pass, they hit big plays. So that's going to be something to watch for there. But basically, it's all about the running game with Paul Pewitt. Their leading rusher is LeJathan Allen. He has 233 carries for 2,092 yards and 28 touchdowns. He's averaging about 140 yards a game. He's averaging 9 yards a carry. Holder is next. He's got 162 carries for 1,186 yards and 16 touchdowns. Next on the list is Kadrian Johnson. He has 107 carries for 1,063 yards and 16 touchdowns. And next on the list, the 4th leading rusher is DeAndre Hill. He has 137 carries for 963 yards and 9 touchdowns. And to round out the quintet is Keontae Hawkins. He has 89 carries for 810 yards and 7 touchdowns. So that's what you're getting with Paul Pewitt. You're getting a 2,000-yard rusher, 2 1,000-yard rushers, a guy who's 37 yards from being a 1,000-yard rusher, and another guy who's got 800 yards rushing and is averaging 9 yards a carry. In fact, 3 of those guys are averaging over 9 yards a carry, and 2 of them are averaging a little over 7 yards a carry. And so that's their offense. It's slot T. They mix it up. They'll give it to anybody on any down. They don't. It doesn't matter to them because they're all effective. And they've had great success. Like we said, it's their best season in 14 years. And they're putting up points. Outside of the first couple of games of the season, when they won 27-14 and 29-14 against New Boston and Hooks, they're racking up points. They've 46, 60, 42, 47, 32, 45. The game they lost to Dangerfield, they put up 38, 61, 41, 52, 53, 45, and then last week against 24 against East Bernard. So it's a situation where they've been tough to stop, and somebody cracked the code, but they had to score 40-something points to do it. So it will be interesting to see what Gunter can do in stopping the running game. I think this is a good matchup. I hadn't seen a lot about East Bernard and how they kind of run things. I feel like Gunter's usually a really good defensive, a good run defense team, and so I thought, kind of looking ahead, that there would be a better opportunity for them. I think East Bernard is a little more of a balanced team. They've got the ability to throw the ball, kind of spread things out there, both offensively. They do have they've got 3 or 4 runners too, but they're definitely if you look at Pewitt, I mean, it's like 96%, if not higher, running the ball, and I feel like Gunter's run defense is really good. They've really shut people down in that regard. So I think that's a better matchup. But who knows? When you get to this point, everybody's good. Paul Pewitt's feeling really good about themselves. It will be interesting, like we talked about, the whole Pottsboro Grandview experience factor. Here you have a program that this is their 3rd championship game appearance in 4 years. These guys know what it's like to go to that stadium and go through the warm-up process and all the pageantry and everything. And you have Paul Pewitt that's there for the first time. How are they going to handle it? So that's going to be an interesting thing there. And I think a lot of people, we mentioned, that are looking at Grandview as the favorite. I think a lot of people are looking at Gunter as the favorite. They did knock out Canadian, who was the number 1 team the favorite, especially going into last weekend. They hadn't, that was Canadian's first loss. Canadian had not scored fewer than 35 points in a game, and Gunter held them to 20. Now East Bernard was highly ranked too. That was their first loss of the season. I think Pewitt was a little bit of an underdog, even though I kind of felt that they would win that game based off what I had seen of them. And so you have two teams that I think a lot of people didn't think they were going to be there. I think a lot of people thought it was going to be Canadian East Bernard for whatever reason. But I think we have a great matchup. Going to be a lot of running. I don't think Gunter's not normally a passing team either. They go about it a different way than the slot T. So this could be a quick game, but it could also be a very exciting game. So we will see what happens on Thursday. It's going to be a long day for me. I'm excited about it. I've never had to do a doubleheader for the championship game. I've done it for a couple earlier rounds in the playoffs, especially the week after Thanksgiving, but I've never had to cover a championship game for football at least. Cover somebody and then turn around and cover another game with a chance for a championship in that game as well. So it's going to be an exciting Thursday. I will do a recap of that next week. I know next week is Christmas. I'll be on vacation. I'll be traveling back home to Rhode Island. Yes, I'm from Rhode Island, if you did not know that. And we'll find a day. I don't know if it's going to be the same day because Wednesday's Christmas Day. So I don't know how we're going to work it out, but we will work it out, and we'll do a final recap. Hopefully we'll be able to talk about two state champions and what great seasons they had. Either way, great seasons. You make a championship game, it's a great season no matter what. You want to win it, and we'll see what happens on then. So thanks for listening. Hopefully, if you are listening, you're going to the games. I think it'd be really great to have almost all of Grayson County, if not all of Grayson County, in the stands for a great day for football, and hopefully it's a day that is remembered for a long time around here as the day that two Texoma teams were able to win championships. So thanks for listening, and we'll wrap everything up for sure next week as the football season has hit the championships, and we'll see what happens.